I'm Paul Harvey. Good day.
All right.
Nick!
Gentlemen,
Nick's your buddy. Kind of guy you can drink a beer with.
start your engine!
6:06 on the Big 89 WLS. Andrea Darlison for Steve Cochran. Nick DiGilio is here.
Hey,
Big
how are you?
movie weekend. Good to see you, my friend.
It's great to see. It's always
Been a
great to see.
while.
You know how much I love you, Andrea.
I feel the same way. Mutual admiration
We've
society.
loved each other for how long have we loved each other, Andrea?
Since day one in a beautiful spring day
That's right.
in
No,
1978.
the first time I saw Nick DiGilio, it was the fall of 90. It was Thanksgiving weekend, 1997. You were
what are you-
co-hosting with. You were
What are you,
hosting
Mary Lou
with
Henner?
Roy.
What?
No, and usually I don't remember things. It's weird the things I remember. You know, my mom will say, "Remember when we did this as a kid, and we took you to Niagara Falls, and something
Niagara
you would
Falls.
remember." I'm like, "Yeah, no,
But
I can remember."
Okay, so November of 97?
yeah, November
So
of
that was,
'97.
I didn't have my own show yet at the car
No, you were
wash.
co-hosting with Roy Leonard, the great
Okay.
Roy Leonard.
Yeah.
Who actually I quoted him this week, Tom. And again, so this is where I can remember weird things, but not the others. I was talking about Roy earlier this week, wasn't I, Tom? And I forget what the reference was.
Yeah, me neither. I don't
See,
know.
yeah, it's just one win and one at the other.
These days
but
just
yeah,
roll
I remember
together.
the first
Hey,
time I
it's
met
nice
Nick.
to see that Tom's still the same producer
and
he is
Nick
when I
had-
had him.
Nick
Oh,
had,
thanks a lot.
Nick had Tom length hair at this point, and you had it back like in a ponytail.
I have very long
and
hair.
you walk through, and I would always listen to you because I loved Roy. I parked in Roy's parking spot the very first day I ever started.
Did he have your ass towed?
No, he came in. He said, young lady. He said, that's my spot. It was, of course, like spot number one.
Of
So, of
course.
course, I parked there thinking, it's my
yeah.
first day here.
Yeah, yeah.
24 years old. I'm, taking
Yeah.
on the world. And he said, young lady, that's my parking spot. He said, but that's okay. You can park there today.
He's the man.
He said, just tomorrow, find alternate parking.
The greatest,
It was
the
great.
greatest broadcaster that ever lived.
But you
Roy
walked through,
Leonard.
and I loved your point. You guys were like my Siskel and Ebert.
Yeah.
I mean, we're about the same age. It's not like I grew up.
Yeah.
listening, but I would, as an adult, young adult, listen to you guys and your reviews, and I loved your
It's interesting at that
back
time.
and forth.
At that
yeah.
time, both Roy and I really knew Roger and Gene pretty well.
Yeah, exactly,
It's interesting
right?
because I watched Roger and Gene. I read Roger and Gene
At
when
the
I was much
movies.
younger, and I watched them on Channel 11,
Yeah.
sneak previews and
Sneak
at the
previews, yeah.
movies and all that stuff. And then to actually be colleagues with them and see them in the screening room, on a daily
How
basis.
cool is that?
Yeah, it was cool.
Yeah,
it was cool.
Did you guys? Okay, so a little inside or background. Did you, when you're at screenings with the other critics, do you all talk about what you think of the movie?
Okay.
I mean, I'm sure it's pleasantries like, "Hey, good to see you, man."
Yeah, and it still happens.
Okay.
It's weird too because I've been doing this a long time. I've been reviewing movies. Next year will be 40 years. I've been reviewing movies this year, 39 years.
Wow,
I've been
that's
started in
insane.
1985.
That's cool.
The first movie I reviewed on Roy's show was Friday the 13th,
Part 6.
6.
Parts,
Part 6.
really?
Yeah, who doesn't remember anything now?
Yeah.
Exactly. Wow. Yeah.
Wow, man, still bitter. So
That was your first movie review?
on official.
Okay,
I had been a part of Roy's show like a regular caller. I was like that, that jerk, hey, here's Nick. And then I'd get on the air and I'd be like, hey, did you see the thing? And he'd be like, no, not yet. And I'm like, and then
Exactly
Roy, for
like
some
that,
reason,
too.
Roy took a liking to me. And he was like, here's this punk who went to Columbia who he really knows his stuff.
His stuff, right.
So he brought me in, and then ultimately what happened, I didn't even know the story. I don't know if you know the story, but I went in and I interviewed for the position of producer of Roy's show.
Okay.
Back on at Bradley Place.
Right.
Like in 85.
That was back in the day, kids, when you had to interview for the positions.
Right.
And there was like a competition, like a healthy competition
and
that
I
went on.
in, and Roy was like, you're a smart kid, and and I didn't graduate from. I went to Columbia for a while and dropped out. I didn't have any money, so I dropped out, and I was just a movie freak. And so I went in and I interviewed, and I didn't get the gig. Nina Newhouser did, who's awesome. She was an awesome producer. But
Really?
Nina got the gig, and then
Okay.
I didn't get it. And Roy goes, hey, listen, man. Because that's hey, listen, man. You didn't get the producer gig. Why don't you just review movies on the air with me? And I went, oh, that's a
Okay.
consolation prize?
Right.
What? And he's like, yeah, I'm tired of seeing kung fu movies. I'm tired of seeing that horror crap. You handle that.
That's cool.
And
so
that's
you
how
got
it started.
that genre,
I started
yeah.
reviewing crappy movies with Roy every Saturday morning. And then that evolved into me being the co-host of the movie segment and then filling in and doing all kinds of stuff. That's how it happened.
And then leading to the show.
I owe everything.
And how old were
to
you at
Roy.
that point?
19 when I first started.
Do you remember the very first movie that you ever called in to talk about?
Well, listen, I can tell you this. I used to win a lot of stuff because he would do trivia questions and stuff. So I remember I won the soundtrack to Caddyshack.
No way.
That's awesome.
The soundtrack to Caddyshack and
Cassette
passes.
tape? Like,
no, it was vinyl.
Oh, it was vinyl.
I won the soundtrack to Caddyshack, a T-shirt. I can't remember what the T-shirt was, and of course, like this was a big thing. Passes to King Richard's Fair. Which is now the Renaissance, the Bristol.
Yes,
the Bristol Renaissance
I
Fair.
remember that. We
used
go
to
to
be
that.
called the King Richard's Fair, and they had you'd walk around WGN at Bradley Place, and even when we moved to the Tribune Tower, and every time that the Ren Fair would come around, stacks of tickets everywhere.
Oh,
you know,
yeah.
like that, because they would sponsor the hell out of us over at the car wash,
Right?
And so like you would walk around, and like everybody would get like the entire. If you wanted to, you could go every single day for free to the Ren Fair. So I won. Yeah, the very first. I don't know if it's the first thing I won, but I specifically. Oh, and I won the soundtrack to Clash of the Titans
Oh, that's funny.
from 1981. So I started calling him
I
79,
actually loved
80.
Clash of the Titans.
I do too.
I remember Harry Hamlin, right?
Yeah.
He was,
wow.
He was Perseus?
I think. I think.
I was obviously not at your level, but I was such a big movie buff in college, and I would play in the Daily Illini, in the little college newspaper.
Yeah.
Every year you do the Oscar predictions, and the year, I'm going to back away from the microphone as I tell you this story because I love you. But we have one major disagreement in our relationship, the Silence of the Lambs,
yeah,
and that was the
hate.
year. And I entered the little contest, and I said that they're going to sweep and they're going to win, and they did.
And it did, yeah.
And you know what I won? The VHS tape of the Oscar ceremony from the year before. It was called like Oscars, whatever, Oscars 1989.
Yeah.
Well, just in case you didn't have any Valium to help you fall asleep.
But you know what though, Tom? The funny part, there was no YouTube or anything like that. So having the Oscars on tape,
sure.
Oh,
No, that was a thing. That was a thing.
So that would
was
have been
cool.
they won in
91. So
91.
92 was the ceremony.
So this would have been. So I won Oscars 1991, 1990. Then,
90.
yeah.
So
the year
Dances
before.
with
Dances with Wolves, yeah.
Yes.
When Dances with Wolves beat Goodfellas.
Wow, it's probably good you have that on
know.
tape. That's a big moment.
Right?
Oh, I can't stand that movie. I can't stand.
Which
and
one?
Kevin,
Wait,
Dances with Wolves, I can't
oh,
stand.
yeah.
it.
Come on, the Two Socks, the dog,
no.
wolf
Two Socks?
thing.
No.
Come on,
Oh,
man.
God, don't
Kevin
tell me.
Costner's got a new 7-hour Western coming out that's going to just kill me when I
Don't
try
tell
to.
me you didn't cry when Two Socks was shot.
Listen,
and
here's
I'm
the
not
thing.
spoiling
Kevin
anything. It's been
Costner-
30 years.
Kevin Costner is not top. He's not top Fandango, and he never will.
No.
And that was in 1985.
Is he a nice guy? Is he a good interview?
I've never.
Okay.
I don't know.
I love the.
You never sought it out. You're just like, why do I want to talk to
I
Kevin
like the
Costner?
behind the scenes stories about
Yeah.
they're great.
I can
or
tell you
they're
off
not.
the air who's the biggest jerk I've ever.
You want to tell me on the air?
No.
Can you give the initials?
No.
Okay.
All right, I'll say it. George Lucas.
Wow. It's not George Lucas.
No, it's not at all. We want to know what Nick is thinking. You got your new podcast that dropped today.
Yeah, I have 2 podcasts
Yeah.
that I do for Radio Misfits Podcast Network. You can check out radiomisfits.com. And, of course, I'm on every platform available, your Spotify's, your Apples, all of them.
Yeah.
The Nick D podcast drops on Tuesdays and Fridays. Today's podcast is a spectacular one. Stephen Tobolowsky is the host, is the guest. You remember him from roughly 175,000 movies.
Yes.
I guess quickly, the easiest one to remember is he plays Needle Nose Ned, the insurance salesman in
Groundhog Day. Yep.
Yeah. That's a doozy. That's him. And he's become a friend. And he's in this new Chris Pine movie called Pool Man. And we talk about that. And he tells some incredible stories about the making of that. And then, I don't know if you know this or not, but you have to listen to the podcast. Stephen Tobolowsky is responsible, is the reason why Radiohead is named Radiohead.
No kidding.
I'm not going to tell you the story because you have to listen to the podcast.
Yeah, good tease.
But yeah, that's why
I like
the
that.
band Radiohead, Tom York, the band Radiohead, it can be traced back. The reason why they're called Radiohead, it can be directly traced back to Stephen Tobolowsky.
Oh, that's cool.
So Stephen
That's a great
Tobolowsky is the
tease.
guest on that. And then Esmeralda Leon, who you know.
Yeah.
She's my co-host, and we always do fun stuff together. And we taste test a lot of weird food. So we eat some seaweed on this podcast.
Thank God. I'm glad you didn't say taste cicadas.
Although I'm interested in that.
Everybody's doing that now with the
that
Malort and
was
all that.
Malort. Yeah, the Malort. I'll tell you something. 10 years ago, I would have drank that entire bottle.
Oh,
Yeah.
with the cicada?
Yeah, or without. It didn't matter.
Right, exactly.
So that's a Nick D podcast with Stephen Tobolowsky dropped today.
Okay.
Everywhere you get your podcast, it's called the Nick D podcast. And then I have a Saturday Night Live podcast called That Show Hasn't Been Funny in Years. And that drops every Wednesday.
Okay.
And this episode of That Show Hasn't Been Funny in Years, the SNL podcast, is all about probably the funniest and most amusing moments in SNL history where people break on stage.
Oh, those are my favorite.
A lot of people love it. And it was looked down upon, in the early days because you weren't supposed to do that. And so,
isn't that the game though? They try to make each
sometimes
other
they
break.
do it. Jimmy Fallon and Horatio Sands, that was their whole thing.
Yeah.
Like they would they were idiots and they would come out and they would laugh, But the reason why I did it was because a few weeks ago, if you remember, there was a sketch where Ryan Gosling and Mikey Day played Beavis and Butthead.
Oh,
they
my
played two
God.
guys that looked like Beavis and Butthead. And Heidi Gardner, who's my favorite cast member on the show right now,
Yes.
and one of my favorite female cast members. I adore Heidi
She's
Gardner.
great.
Beautiful and hilarious and awesome. Well, she is a pro, and she very rarely, if ever, cracks.
And she did.
She lost her mind.
I know.
And
it's one
so
of my
that
favorite sketches.
Yeah, and so inspired by that, I went back and I look at 5 of the biggest moments on SNL where the entire cast just lost it.
Is the Ryan Gosling, Kate McKinnon,
The
Space Invaders? Were they?
It's
Okay.
not. It's
Okay.
it's mentioned.
That-
obviously,
okay. That was
but
a good
no,
one too.
like the very first one that I remember, and I have it, and I talk about it on the show, is when Candice Bergen is hosting, and she and Gilda Radner are doing a PSA for people who are stupid.
Oh God.
And Candice Bergen is supposed to be the smart person in the sketch, but she screws up and forgets Gilda Radner's character's name
Oh God.
on stage, and then Gilda Radner roasts her for it, and she loses it. So
Those
yeah.
are the best. I
Yeah.
can't wait.
So
And both
anyways,
of them are out and available now.
Yeah. If you go to radiomisfits.com or any platform, you got the Nick T podcast, and you got That Show Hasn't Been Fun.
All right. I know you want to talk Furiosa.
Oh my God.
How many times have you seen it?
3 times.
Okay.
Yeah.
You're going again this weekend.
Yeah, I'm going 2 more times this weekend.
All right. So this is a prequel.
It's a prequel to Fury Road.
Fury Road. Okay.
So now there have been 5 Mad Max movies. The great, the brilliant, the insane, mad genius of George Miller, who is the filmmaker who writes and directs these movies and has been making, it's now 45 years of Mad Max.
Whoa.
So the first one was Mad Max with Mel Gibson, and it
Tina
was
Turner?
kind of like, no, that's the third one.
Oh, that's the third one.
So the first one is Mad Max, it's Mel Gibson, and it was kind of a revenge biker cop movie.
Okay.
Then Road Warrior was the second one. That's Mel Gibson. But then at this point, we're in a wasteland. There's a post-apocalyptic world, and gasoline is the substance that everybody is fighting for. And there are crazy characters and crazy gangs roving the Dust Bowl desert of the wasteland. That's Road Warrior. And it's one big, long, crazy chase scene. The third one is called Mad Max Beyond Thunderdome. That's with Tina Turner.
That's with Tina Turner,
and
right.
that's the one that has the group of kids, the cult of kids that are walking around, and Mad Max cavorts with them. So those
we
are the
don't need
first
another
3.
hero, right?
Those are the first 3. That song is in there, yeah. And then the fourth one came years later, 2015, and that was Fury Road.
Charlize Theron.
Yes, which is perhaps the greatest action movie ever made in the history of film, and is one of the greatest movie accomplishments in the history of film. And so now this is a prequel to Fury Road.
Okay.
So on the
I'm with
scale of the other movies, it falls in between, but this is the direct prequel, and it tells you the story from childhood of Furiosa, the character that Charlize Theron plays. And in this movie, the character is played at a very young age by the brilliant Alila Brown,
Okay.
who plays her very young, and she turns into Anya Taylor-Joy.
Love her from
And-
Queen's Gambit. She's
Yes.
great, right?
Yeah, she's fantastic.
You like her?
Everything about this movie is great, but
Okay.
it's different than Fury Road, and people are going to be upset about it. It's about 35 minutes longer than Fury Road. Fury Road takes place over the course of 3 days. This movie takes place over the course of 18 years, and it tells a widened story. You get to know more about the you get to know more about the wasteland. You learn more about the Bullet Farm and the Gas Town and all these other places, and all the other characters. They introduce a new villain called Dementis, played by Chris Hemsworth.
Okay.
And he's unbelievable in it. And it's not just a one long chase scene. Fury Road is relentless in its pace. It is relentless. This movie is more concerned with opening up the wasteland, telling you more about it, fleshing out the characters. It's rich. It's beautiful. It is an unbelievably brilliant movie.
Oh, it sounds great.
And it's got a credible action in it. There is a sequence in the movie that's about almost 20 minutes long, about halfway through the movie, That is one long, insane chase scene that's very similar to what you see in Fury Road. But for the most part, it's a different movie. It's much more violent. And the tone is different. Mm-hmm. And people who expect Fury Road might be disappointed by this. But that's the thing. George Miller, the director, never repeats himself.
Okay, good.
Never. And all 5 the Mad Max movies are completely different types of movies.
So don't go in with the expectation that it's going to be like
you
Fury
think it's
Road.
going to be Fury Road. It's not.
Okay.
It's not at all.
Sounds awesome.
It's
sounds really good.
It is
sounds like it'd be
easily
beautiful up on the big screen, too.
You have to see it on the biggest screen possible, preferably IMAX or in the Dolby theaters. This is cinema. George Miller is one of the greatest directors that's ever lived. He's 80 years old. This guy's 80 years old. You watch this movie, it looks as though it was made by a 20-year-old. It's got that kind of energy.
Oh, that's cool.
It's an astonishing piece of cinema. It is why I go to the movies.
Yes.
It is without question one of the very, very best movies that anybody will see this year. And to add, to the Mad Max saga, making these 5 movies 5 of the most important. It's funny. Chris Hemsworth was on Colbert last night.
Okay.
And they were talking about it, and he's Australian. Mm-hmm. And so is George Miller, and these movies are shot in Australia, and they represent Australia.
Yeah.
These movies, these Mad Max movies. Mad Max was the very first Mad Max in '79, was one of the first times anybody saw really Australian films directly from Australia. And so Chris Hemsworth, was asked, you're Australian, this has got to be a big deal. He said, yeah, the Brits have Harry Potter, the Americans have Star Wars, and we have Mad Max.
Mad Max, that's
and that's
cool.
the way it works.
Yes.
These Mad Max movies are just as important, if not more important, than the Harry Potter movies and the Star Wars movies. And George Miller continues to be one of the most creative geniuses filmmaking of, and Furiosa, without question.
Right, internationally as well as to the Aussies. That's
astonishing movie.
It sounds great.
It is great.
Go see Furiosa.
That's the big one. And
Mad
then there's
Max
a Garfield
Saga.
movie.
Garfield movie?
Yeah.
Not so much?
No.
Okay. All right. How about
there is a film called there's a film called Sight.
Okay.
Which is based on a true story.
At SITE.
It's SIGHT, yeah. And it's about an eye surgeon who comes to America from China.
Oh, the Greg Kinnear one.
And Greg Kinnear's in it.
And
it's about a guy who is determined to save the eyesight of an orphan. And it's based on a true story. And it's an inspiring movie. It's very sluggish, and it's not very well made. The acting is pretty good. It's worth seeing, but this is a serious movie, and they make some missteps in it. And I don't know. I don't know the story in reality or how close it is to what really happened. But it's kind of sluggish. Kinnear's okay. The other guy is really good, who plays the doctor. It doesn't work all the way through, but it's a great story.
Okay.
And I. If you're looking for a drama, that's out there. If you don't want to see something crazy and adventurous like Furiosa.
All right, I did tease best Memorial Day movies, but I know we're out of time. Can you give me top 2?
Top 2 Memorial Day movies?
Yeah.
Let's see.
And I know Pearl Harbor's not on there.
No.
Okay.
No, not in the least. I would say, well, let's see. Why am I blanking on the Catherine Bigelow?
Hurt Locker.
Yes, Hurt Locker is one of my favorites.
One of the best.
One of my favorites.
All right, Hurt Locker.
Yeah, and Best Days of Our Lives.
Okay.
And Apocalypse Now.
Oh, awesome! You can never go wrong with Apocalypse Now.
Thin Red Line.
Thin Red Line. Oh, yeah,
There
Thin
you go,
Red Line,
Thin Red Line.
definitely.